This beautifully colored citrine is Santa Ana Madeira color, and it's from Brazil. It weighs in at 9.3 carats. Santa Ana Madeira Citrine is perhaps the most coveted color of citrine, as less than 2% of all citrine comes in this color. The name comes from the fortified wine made in the Madeira Islands off the coast of Portugal. The Amethyst is AAA quality and is also from Brazil. I bought both the citrine and the amethyst rough recently from my friend Joe H. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, I've got two stones, one beautiful piece of amethyst and one Santa Ana Madeira Citrine. And I'm going to cut a design I saw that looks pretty interesting called the Greek cross. So I wanted to see if there's any internal problems with these stones. So I'm going to use Refractol. Both citrine and amethyst are quartz, and our Refractol has the same refractive index as quartz. So what should happen is it should make the stone pretty much invisible. You won't see the outside problems of the stone once we put it in the Refractol, so you can see into the stone. So you see how the stone just kind of turned to an orange blob because the outside is now the same refractive index, so it looks like all the same material. So now we can more closely look into the stone and see that there's no internal problems with this stone. So should cut a nice Greek cross. And the reason I'm going to use two different stones is I don't know what the design's going to turn out looking like. I've never cut it before, and if I just cut one stone, there may be a problem with the stone. Maybe it doesn't look good in purple, maybe it doesn't look good in orange. So there'll be other reasons why the stone doesn't look good other than the design. So, and I'm using a big stone and a small stone. So let's look at our amethyst. Same thing, we put it in the Refractol and you can see through the stone. Let's take a look at it and see if there's any problems with our amethyst. And again, I don't think there's any more Refractol on the market. There is something somebody invented called, I don't know, I have to look up the name. It's like Refractol. They kind of copied the name, but it's not the same. Okay, so you can see some inclusions. 3, turn them around. I think if I turn the stone around, you can see them better. Kind of challenging to get the camera to see what the eye can see, but okay. So those inclusions are on the outside of right at the edge of the stone. So those will be cut away. There's no problem with those. Other than that, I don't see any real problems. This is another clean stone. So that line up there, that's just under the surface. That'll get cut away. I don't see any major internal problems with this stone either. So to clean off Refractol, again, it's oily. So what I do is I take the stones to the sink and just use some dish soap, some degreaser, regular dish soap, and that'll get the Refractol off of it. So these are the stones we're going to use for the Greek cross. Okay, this is what it looks like once we've got the stones on the dop. And again, we just rotate our transfer jig whenever the epoxy is either running too far up the dop or down the stone as it begins to harden up. And then after, I usually wait overnight, and then to be able to start working on these stones for our Greek cross.
Today I will be cutting an interesting design created by Norman W. Steele called Greek cross. When I finish these two gemstones, they should look like this from the top, side, and bottom. You can find the design online at facetdiagrams.org. Here, let me show you how to find the diagram. Don't worry if you don't understand some of the instructions and the information shown on the diagram. I explain all the information in gem designs in a 2-part video. So if you have questions, take a look at these videos.
I've used the 320 grit topper and preformed the citrine into our Greek cross. The only thing I have not done is the girdle. The instructions call for, at 90 degrees, the girdle, 48 girdle facets. It doesn't exactly say which facets, but what that means to me is the instructions are to use a 96 tooth index. So 48 facets on a 96 tooth index means every other tooth. So that means to me you start at the 96 and use every even numbered tooth, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on, 48 facets. And I'll do that eventually, but instead what I did was every 6 teeth, the 6, 12, 18, and so on, which are still even numbered. So as I use the 600 grit topper next, or the 12M after that, is when I'll go and cut every other facet, the 48 girdle facets. It didn't make sense to make all those extra cuts at this stage, but I did cut everything else. That's why it's kind of looks, you know, wavy here, is because there'll be another facet here and another facet here. So it'll even up. I can see how it will work. And so now, using the tiered dop feature of the Ultratech, instead of switching laps and continuing on with the citrine, I'll simply remove the citrine stone from the dop. And again, this feature of the Ultratech means that when I put this into the dop, it fits one way, right there. It's going to fit exactly right, or at least close enough at the 320 grit level of cutting. I did some initial preforming here, but I'm going to go back now and finish up with my 320 grit lap on the Amethyst. Then I'll go to the 600 grit lap on the Amethyst, and without changing laps, I'll switch back to the citrine, cut it with the 600, then go to the 12M lap and work the citrine. And I don't know if I'll switch dops after that or stick with the citrine all the way through. But it will have saved me a little bit of time by cutting 2 stones, by using that this feature of the keyed dops that Ultratech has. So I finished going over our Amethyst with the 600 grit diamond topper, and now I'll switch stones, leaving the 600 topper in, and go over the citrine, and then I'll switch laps to the 12M and I'll go through the citrine, and probably leave the citrine in with the 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, and then the tin lap with cerium oxide before switching back to the Amethyst. But it's coming along nicely. I still have not done every other facet, every 2 facets, even facets on the girdle. I just did every 6. So instead of 48 facets to worry about, I only worry about 16, which saves a little time. But when I get to the 12M lap, I probably go ahead and do every other facet on the girdle, just to see how it lines up here above the girdle. Right now I can't quite envision it, because it's going to change the way it looks a little bit when there's 3 times the facets. And I'm switched to the 12M, my favorite lap, the Adamas 12M, which is a 1500 grit about lap. And I'll start faceting the citrine with that, and then I'll go through and continue with the citrine in the quill till it's done, till I'm done polishing the pavilion. Now I'm going to go ahead and go every 2 teeth on the girdle. Again, the instructions call for 48 girdle facets, so on a 98 tooth index, that's every 2, so every even number. I've been doing every 6, so instead of having to worry about cutting 48 facets, I only had to worry about cutting 16, so it saved a lot of time up to now. Now I'll go ahead and cut every other facet. And I'm expecting this little facet up here, this is the final row or tier 5, 41 degree angle. It has 4 facets, 2, 3, and of course 4. It's looking a little bit long and thin, and I'm betting that when I go every 2 facets, every 2 teeth here on the girdle, I'll bet you that makes it a little bit wider and shorter and makes it look exactly the way it should look. So we're moving on with the 12M. Okay, decision time on our citrine. If you see, follow the top part of the girdle as I rotate it, you see a slight inclusion right there. Slight crack just on the skin. So it goes down a little further than you can see. You can see with the loop a little further down, but I think I can lower the pavilion to that point and still have plenty of space left to cut the crown. And there'll still be a small feather of a fracture that may be seen on the girdle. But the girdle again is going to be about the thickness, 0.3 millimeter, about the thickness of a fingernail. So I think I'm going to be okay if I grind down the pavilion about to there. I don't think I have to make the stone much smaller to get rid of that inclusion. That would be another way, would be to grind the girdle in until we get rid of the inclusion. But then you just end up with a smaller stone. So the decision always is, do you leave an inclusion in, or do you cut it out and make the stone more either internally flawless or near internally flawless? So in this case, I think I'll grind down the pavilion, not take any more off the girdle, and see where we are. All right, I'm using 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, and on the pavilion, the instruction number 2, the question for me is, how far do you run the facet down over instruction number 1? So what I think, and then again, there's no comments in the design. There may have been in the lapidary journal that it was published in, but I don't have that journal. So what I'm going to do, what I've done is I've run the facet down. This is facet 2, this is facet 1. So I've run it down so that 1 matches the kind of the peak here in the girdle. And then I'll run this one down, same thing, so that it'll line up with that one and touch this kind of peak in the girdle. I think that's kind of the way the picture looks to me, but again, there's no instruction. So that's the way I'm going to cut it, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, for the instruction number 4, which is cutting this larger facet right here, the question becomes, how do you know how far down to cut it? And I think, at least the way I'm going to do it, is this, the edge of it, the line here and the line here, I'm going to have those match up with the girdle facet lines right there. And if I can get you to see the other one. So this line will go down and match, which it does, the girdle line right there. So that's how I'm going to know how far to cut these. So that way it looks like the bottom of this number 4 facet matches the bottom of the number 1 facets. And kind of goes up and down. This is not a straight girdle, so it's kind of unique in that regard. So that's how I'm going to cut number 4, and if that works out, I'll make notes in my diagram for the Greek cross, so I'll know next time. Okay, I finished polishing our citrine Greek cross with tin lap and sodium oxide, and it's all polished up, and now I will remove our citrine from the quill and transfer it so we can cut the crown, and I'll put in the amethyst that I've preformed and cut all the way through the 600 grit diamond on a topper, and I'll start, because it'll go right in, and because of the key dot feature of the Ultratech, it'll be all set up, and I'll start cutting it with the 12M lap, which is about a 1500 grit. Okay, I've set our citrine up in our transfer jig, and I put a small tiny piece of modeling clay in the very bottom of the dop. Can't really see it in there. Yeah, you can barely see that blue at the very bottom, and the purpose of that is that the weakest part of our stone is the culet, and when I put in the adhesive, in this case I'm going to use super glue because it's not a very large stone. The super glue at the culet will be, that adheres to the culet will also adhere to the modeling clay. And when I remove that dop, if I have to do any pulling or anything, the modeling clay will give before the culet, and I don't want to break the culet. That's the purpose of that, and that's what I do. So I'm using Loctite 404. You can use any kind of super glue you want. This works for me. I keep it in the refrigerator. I mark it when I open it, and after a year I get rid of it. So just a drop from the very bottom, push the top onto the bottom, tighten it up, turn it over, and so that you make sure there's adhesive on the stone as well as on the dop. Super glue sets up pretty quick, so you just have to move it around a little bit. And now I'll work on the amethyst, and after I finish that, probably tomorrow I'll work on the upper half of our citrine. All right, I finished polishing the pavilion of our amethyst Greek cross. I used tin lap and cerium oxide, polished up beautifully. Now I'll transfer this and in our transfer jig and get ready to cut the upper part or the crown. All right, for our citrine, to align it, make sure it's aligned now that we've transferred to cut the crown. It's kind of difficult because the girdle facets were faceted every other tooth, which means they're not very wide. I mean, there's 48 facets around the girdle. So it would be kind of hard to do it the normal way of setting your degrees at 90 and running the spindle down until the facet just touched the precision block tool here from Ultratech. But the good news is that the Ultratech dops being tiered, being keyed, cut at an angle, they fit in one way. So once you transfer it, they're pretty well set up so that you're going to be aligned. So yeah, I relied on that and just kind of tested it. It looks like we're set up where the facet is just touching that metal block when I raise the spindle up and lower it. But again, it's a very small facet, so it's hard to tell. And the other thing is the facet we're talking about is from the number 4 cut on the pavilion. So it is lined up in the middle of the number 4 cut, which I could see from the back. You can see which part of the pavilion you're cutting. And it looks to be pretty well lined up. Again, it's kind of a challenge because it's small. Fortunately, I think in this case, the key dot feature of the Ultratech has made sure that I'm in alignment. We'll find out when I start cutting. All right, I finished pre-polishing our citrine Greek cross with 3000 diamond grit on a bat lap, and now we're ready to polish. So the crown, then after that we'll cut the crown. So we'll polish, and the crown will come down to right here, top of this point, top of that point. So the crown will come down that far, and the rest will be part of the design. So it's a rather large crown. It sticks up more than normal crowns, but we'll polish it and see how it turns out. Okay, I finished polishing the crown of our citrine Greek cross, and now I'll take it out of the quill and I'll cut and polish the crown of our amethyst Greek cross. Then I'll cut both the tables of both stones one after the other. That way I only have to set up for a table cut one time, which saves a little bit of time in cutting the two stones. Okay, I've put the Amethyst Greek cross into the quill of our Ultratech machine, and using the key dop, it set it up and should have set it up properly so that everything's aligned. In this cut, this Greek cross, it's very important to get the top and the bottom halves of the stones perfectly aligned where they're supposed to be to make that star feature. So at the 96th tooth, what should happen is there's a facet on the girdle, and I'll put my finger behind so you can see where I've marked it with the Sharpie pen. Right there, that facet is right in the center of this facet, and that's where the 96th tooth should be cutting. So there's two ways to verify it. As I cut instruction A at 53 degrees, the 4 and the 92 should be cutting here and here, and the line between them as I cut, there'll be a line when they overlap, and that line should come right down the middle of that girdle facet when I make the cuts to the crown here with the 53 degrees. The other way is instruction B, which leads to a meet point where the point hits that facet, and that point, when I get to instruction B, should also just hit that the middle, well, it should go on the middle of that facet that I've marked with the Sharpie pen. That way I'll know I'm in alignment. If I don't hit those, I have to make adjustments and to realign our crown. So I'm going to cut with the 320 topper lap right now. Okay, so I've cut the 4 tooth and the 92 tooth of instruction A for our crown at 53 degrees, and just to show you that this is one facet, and this half moon is the other facet, and where they meet kind of goes up into looks like a small hill, and that's right in the center of the facet that should be, according to the diagram, the 96 degrees. So the top and the bottom half are in alignment. Okay, I've finished pre-polishing, preforming, I guess, the Amethyst Greek cross. I just finished with the 600 grit diamond topper, and it cut so quickly. Again, I really like the idea when I have complicated designs that I haven't cut before to cut two stones at the same time with the same design. I'll tell you that the citrine took me a lot more time as I looked at the design and looked at the angle and looked at the teeth and said, now how's that going to work, and how far do I cut, and how do I know when it's, when I've reached it, what am I, it was a lot of time. However, then when I turn to this one, all the instructions, all the lines of instruction from A to F are done. They're all right. It all lines up. Everything's fitting perfectly, and it was quick. So I'd like to know in the comments from you how many of you also cut more than one stone at a time and find that it really speeds up the time you spend cutting that second stone. Let me know in the comments, would you? So I finished using the 12M lap, which is basically a 1500 grit lap, and I'm ready to use 3000 diamond on a bat lap to pre-polish. And this design is challenging. So with the 3000, I've got to bring this down, this triangle here, till it touches, but the up here has to be at the bottom of this facet, this square or rectangular facet. So I've got to bring that down. How much? I don't know, but they've got to match. And then after I bring this and this two little butterfly wings down, the two triangles here have to just touch. So this facet, these two facets are all related to this facet, which makes it challenging because there's very difficult to figure out. There's supposed to be a gap here, so we've got to make it all work out. So I'll try to make it even closer with the 3000 diamond on a vat lap. I'll get it all lined up, and just pointing out that this design is not a beginner design. It just isn't. It's a little bit challenging. It's fun, but challenging. So let me work on the 3000 diamond on a vat lap. Finished polishing our Amethyst Greek Cross with cerium oxide on a tin lap, the crown. Now I just need to set up for a table. So I will set the machine up to cut the table, and I'll cut both the Amethyst and the Citrine one after the other, and only have to set up once. So I finished polishing both of our Greek crosses, the Citrine and the Amethyst, and so now I will soak them in acetone to get the adhesive, the super glue off of the dot, and then we'll weigh them and measure them and send them to BOPIE.
I found the Greek cross design to be challenging, and I would not recommend this cut for a beginning gem cutter. It is a difficult design. However, by cutting two stones at the same time with this design, I learned a lot and definitely spent less time on the second stone than the first, which is one reason I like to cut two stones at once when taking on a new design. The other reason I like cutting two stones at once is that often, as was the case with this citrine, I had a fracture or inclusion, which forced me to make the gemstones smaller than I had originally planned. So having two stones still leaves one larger stone to evaluate the design with. I will say cutting the Greek cross was fun as well as challenging, and I enjoyed cutting these stones. Tell me what you think of the Greek cross design and of these two gemstones. Happy faceting, everyone.